Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today, taking some time out of your busy schedule to learn a little bit more about the CARES Act and all our good information. To just go over some housekeeping rules that if you have any questions, I know I've received a lot of emails. We're going to try and get to those at the end. We're going to try and answer as many as we can. If we don't answer your question, feel free to reach out to me. My email is banderson@easternmichiganbbb.org, and I'll make sure that you get the information you're looking for. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask any questions in the question box, and again, we'll try to get to those at the end. If you have any audio issues, try logging out and logging back in. So many people hosting webinars right now. GoToWebinar said if it's not working on your computer, just to try to call in on your phone. So if you have any issues, feel free to ask me a question. I'll try and help you out as much as I can. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Kyle Cian is the first vice president for Chemical Bank. Her responsibilities cover a broad range of commercial banking, specifically lending. Kyle joined Chemical Bank in 2017 and has over 16 years of experience. She has a proficiency in aerospace and defense, export financing, and medical lending. Kyle holds a degree from Oakland University with a Bachelor of Science degree in finance. Kyle received Corp's Magazine's Michigan's Most Valuable Professional Award in 2019. In 2015, she received the Crain's 40 Under 40 Award for launching a new export lending program that earned recognition from the U.S. Small Business Association. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're really excited to dive into this presentation.
Hi, guys. Thank you for joining. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A and look forward to hearing from you and seeing what I can do to help. So we're going to talk about the different loan programs. There's two. We're going to focus mainly on the PPP, but we're going to talk about a few of those other things. Next slide, please. Thank you. Obviously, everything is changing rapidly. I get so many emails. I'm just trying to keep up the best I can. So this is the best I have right now. This is not legal advice. This is not tax advice. Please contact your CPA or attorney for further things related to that. So there's our disclaimers. Next slide, please. Okay. So I think we should talk about the overall bill today. So there's a $484 billion federal funding that should be finalized in the House today. Its purpose is to refund the PPP and the EIDL loan for small businesses and nonprofits. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. The two loans that people are focusing most on right now are the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is the EIDL loan. There's $50 billion of additional funding allocated for that in the new legislation. That's for businesses experiencing extreme hardship. It's a direct loan from the SBA. So for this loan, you apply directly to the SBA. You do not partner with a bank. It's a low interest lending program for financial obligations and operating expenses that you could have met before this pandemic occurred. So basically, if you're facing a hardship from COVID, there's up to a $2 million loan for this. That's one loan, and I'm going to talk about pairing loans and what you can do and all that in a moment. The other loan, which is the hottest topic I think right now, is the Payroll Protection Program loan. That is a program provided for working capital purposes to cover payroll costs. There's a cap at $100,000. I'll get into all the nuances of that in a little bit. Group health insurance, interest on mortgage debt incurred before 2/15/2020, rent and utilities. There's $310 billion allocated for this PPP loan in what we hope passes in the House today to replenish this fund. There's $60 billion dedicated to small lenders and community-based financial institutions. I imagine that a lot of you probably bank at these smaller institutions, and if you're on the call, you probably haven't gotten your PPP loan, and you desperately need those funds. So there's $60 billion dedicated in this to the smaller banks and institutions in hopes that people like yourselves are able to get these funds. The other thing that's happening in the SBA Express, or the other thing that's happening is part of the CARES Act, is the SBA Express loan, which used to be a smaller loan, is increased to $1 million through 12/31/2020. I want to talk about pairing the loans, what loans you could get together, et cetera, et cetera. So if you get an EIDL loan, you cannot get a payroll protection loan. Now, some people are reading this and there's a technical difference where some people think that you can get both. If there was another economic injury, like if there was a flood in your region or something else where previously you had already gotten an EIDL loan for a different purpose other than COVID, you would be eligible for the payroll protection loan. But you cannot apply directly to the SBA for the EIDL loan and for the payroll protection loan. Now, what you could do is you could apply for both depending on which one you wanted, and if one got approved before the other, you could withdraw your other application. There's another nuance. It appears that if you got the $10,000 from the EIDL loan, you would still be able to get the payroll protection loan. That $10,000 would be subtracted from the forgivable portion of the payroll protection loan, and then you would withdraw your application for the EIDL loan. So I'm sure there'll be some more questions on that, but we'll go over that in a moment. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll talk about the EIDL loan. This is where you apply directly to the SBA. And then there's another portion of this where you can apply to get $10,000 of that fund within 3 days, and that portion is forgivable. It's not taking 3 days, it's taking more like 3 or 4 weeks. And there is additional funds, as I said, going into this later. So if you applied for that $10,000 and you didn't get those funds yet, it's really, really slow. So their goal was 3 to 5 days, and that just hasn't happened. Eligible borrowers on this include small businesses, private nonprofits, agricultural cooperatives, tribal small businesses, employees with 500 or fewer, or businesses with 500 or fewer employers, sole proprietorships, self-employed individuals, and independent contractors. Normally, nonprofit 501c3s and religious organizations 501c19s are excluded, but they are eligible. Small businesses in certain industries can actually have more than 500 employees if they meet the SBA size standards for that industry. And where they made some separate exclusions were for businesses with a NAICS code starting with 72, which are the hospitality and food services, or a franchise on the SBA's registry. If you fall under that NAICS code category, you're allowed to have less than 500 employees per physical location. And that's how you heard about like Shake Shack or something like that getting around this. A business must have suffered substantial economic injury and be able to unmeet its obligations to pay its ordinary and necessary operating expenses, which so many people in Michigan are experiencing right now. It's really unfortunate. Next slide, please. This loan, the EIDL loan, is up to $2 million of loan assistance. You can pay fixed debts, which are like your mortgage expenses, equipment, loans, lines of credit, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that you weren't able to pay due to the COVID-19 impacts. Interest rates on this are 3.75 for small business and 2.75 for nonprofit. The repayment period, I believe they changed it to 10 years with deferred payments for 1 year, and this loan is not eligible for loan forgiveness. We talked about the advance for $10,000, which is available within 3 days of application, but it's really, from the people I've talked to, 3 to 4 weeks. That does not need to be repaid. If you got that $10,000, you can withdraw your application and still apply for a PPP loan, but I would like to emphasize that you cannot get both. Next slide, please. Okay, so the payroll protection program, these are the basics. It's working capital to cover payroll costs, group health insurance, interest on mortgage debt incurred before February 15th. So you had to have your mortgage loan or leases or anything in place before February 15th, and utilities. Rates and terms. The term of a PPP loan has a maturity of 2 years and an annual interest rate of 4%. or excuse me, 1%, with the initial 6 months of payments being automatically deferred. So what that means is it's a 2-year loan. There are no payments for the first 6 months, and anything that is not forgiven, you will have amortized over 18 months. I accidentally said 4% at first because that was the initial rate under the CARES Act, but then there were some modifications. We talked about the constant changes, and that rate on that loan right now is 1%. The objective for people is really to get the majority of these funds forgiven. And as long as 75% of the loan that you take is used for payroll costs and 25% is used for things like rent and utilities, that loan will be forgiven. The portion that's not forgiven, if you were to have any that wasn't forgiven, would be amortized over the 18 months and the 1% interest rate. Now, how much can you borrow? A qualified small business may be eligible to borrow up to 2.5 times of its adjusted average monthly payroll cost for the applicable period. If you had to refinance anything under EIDL, that would be a different disaster, not taking out the loan, and you cannot exceed $10 million. Payrolls are salaries, wages, commissions. It includes tips. When they talk about other payroll costs, one of the caveats is if you make over 100,000 or an individual in your company makes over 100,000, they cap that wage at 100,000. So if you made 120,000, you'd be 100,000 divided by 12 months times 2.5, and that would be your loan amount. Sole proprietors, they use their 2019 income. You take your Schedule C or your K-1s. You had your health insurance and retirement. If you had, for example, I've seen a lot of attorneys, for example, that might have an admin or someone that was on a W-2. You can add in those W-2 wages as long as they don't exceed 100,000. You divide that by 12 and multiply by 2.5. You absolutely cannot include 1099 people in the wages you paid. People that have a 1099 have to apply for themselves under the payroll protection plan. So let's go to the next slide. What if I laid off employees? That's something else I want to talk about in the loan forgiveness. We'll get there. So we don't have the exact details on the loan forgiveness and what you're going to need to prove yet. But what we know is you're eligible for loan forgiveness equal to the amount you spent on the following items during the 8-week period beginning on the date of the origination of the loan. So on the date that you receive the funds, the 8-week period that follows that is what they use for loan forgiveness. So if you had previously laid off employees and hired them back once you took the funds, you're still eligible for this. Payroll costs, which are the same definition of payroll costs under the eligibility. Interest on your existing mortgage obligations, you can't count principal. Rent under an existing lease agreement. Payments on utilities. For borrowers who tipped employees, eligible additional wages paid to those employees. And only 25% of the loan that you took can be not for payroll, and that if it exceeds 25%, that amount wouldn't be forgiven. Next slide. We'll talk about the PPP eligibility. Businesses must have been operating as of February 15, 2020 and meet the following standards. Business with 500 or fewer employees, unless it's one of the NACE codes we talked about earlier, which were the hospitality and the food-related services. A business who otherwise meets the SBA standard, the size standard, which are, it's how many million in revenue, things like that. Individual who operates as a sole proprietor, which we talked about as a little bit. Independent contractors, so those people who receive a 1099, they could apply for this. Individual who's self-employed, tribal concerns, 501c19, which are the veterans organizations. And then we also talked about the churches and things like that. Next slide, please. I want to talk about the application documents a little bit for a moment. So you're going to talk to your bank, and each bank is going to require something different. So the way it works with the SBA is you have to have at least the minimum of what they want, but if your bank were to require more or require something else, you would have to provide it to them. So I'd talk to the relationship manager you have at your bank, but this is just generally what we're looking for application documents. A lot of time we're seeing the 2019 tax documentation. I've seen a lot of 940s, 941s to calculate this. That makes things really easy. Payroll registers. I know like ADP and Paychex have put together some really nice reports that could help you with this. So if you use one of those, or your payroll company that you use, if you use an outside vendor, I'd check with their reports. They provided some really nice things. Independent contractors, we talked about those. You're going to have your 1099, some sort of documentation that shows a total group health insurance premium, just a summary. Documentation for the sum of all your retirement plans, a lot of 401ks. I've seen a lot of SEPs, etc. You can do a nice little Excel spreadsheet, something really simple that can show the summary of these for your banker. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Titles, names, ownership percentages, social security number, and addresses for all those who are over a 20% owner. A copy of a driver's license for those who are over a 20% owner. And a total number of both full and part-time employees as of February 15th for both the applicant and any affiliates if they're broken out. And then you're going to want to have bank deposit account numbers. Some additional things I've seen that people have had and wanted to show in light of changes and just everything else we've seen. A lot of people are having their CPA, their attorney, their spouse, their controller fill out this application. If that individual does fill out the application for you and sign electronically, that's no problem, but you're going to have to provide a copy of their driver's license and their social security number in advance. So it's not that they're applying for the loan that they'd be, it's because they filled out the application. So you have to do a clear report on them, verifying that everything's copacetic. Next slide, please. So I want to say advice for you. Work directly with your primary bank where your operating accounts reside. So if you don't have if you apply for a bank where you don't have your operating accounts, there's additional due diligence that you have to do and the bank has to do. So the list of what I've showed you, there will be more information for the Know Your Borrower guidelines. So I would work directly with your primary bank where your operating accounts reside. I'd call your relationship manager. You should have already been in contact with them. If you haven't, I implore you to please contact them very soon because I expect these funds to run out quickly. You want to gather the documentation we talked about. Talk to your CPA, talk to your attorney if you have any questions about eligibility or things like that. Those financial advisors or the people that you have, your other advisors, can really be beneficial during this time. I've posted some additional resources that we have at TCF. Chemical is a division of TCF, so Chemical Bank, TCF Bank, either one. The SBA and the Treasury also have great up-to-date information, and there's a link to the EIDL application. To get the link to your PPP application, it varies by bank per bank. Some banks are still accepting them. Some you have to get a direct link. Some you go on the website. Some you have to get from your relationship manager, and that's where you want to talk to your primary bank. And with that, I will wrap up my talking, and I'm ready to take some questions.
Perfect. Thank you again so much for sharing all this information. We've already received such great feedback. So Kyle, just again, thank you so much for your time. We do have a lot of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first one was, if I received the PPP and the EIDL loan, do I need to return any funds or should I just deduct the $10K from the forgiveness?
If you just received the $10K, you just deduct that from the forgiveness and then you withdraw your EIDL application.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then how do I check my status of my loan?
that varies by bank. So for me and for our TCF customers, you call me, you call your relationship manager, and I can tell you where the status is. So there's different statuses. There's the whether your loan's been verified. There's whether or not the lender application has been filled out. There's whether you've been credentialed, which means the clear reports have been pulled on your owners. And then there's submission into E-Tran. And then there's receive the SBA number and documentation. So where to find out you are directly in that process, you'd have to contact your bank. So I apologize. I know it's frustrating that it varies per institution.
No, well, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying. We really appreciate it. Another question has there been like a certain timeline? You said it sometimes varies. Do you know how long it would be from applying to receiving money? Is there a typical timeline that you've seen, or is it something that it truly just varies depending on what organization you're with?
On the EIDL loan, I've seen it take over a month. And for the PPP loan, I've seen it anywhere between 48 hours and a week.
Wow.
So, and right now, nothing can be processed because the funds aren't. The funds have dried out. We need the House to approve. I think a lot of banks, you still want to apply. You know, you want to get everything done. So you want to get your application in. You want your loan amount verified. You want your lender to be able to fill out their lender application. You want to get through the credentialing phase, which is pulling the clear reports and the OFACs and things like that. And you want your loan to just have to be uploaded into E-Tran when these new funds are released. So you can get through, you know, a good 90% of the process before these funds are allocated again. And that's what you want to move quickly with in your bank, especially since I expect the funds to be opened up in the next, hopefully 24 to 48 hours. And obviously that's just hopes and things we expect based on the news.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate you clarifying that, because that was another one of our questions is right now we know the funding's not necessarily there. Can I still apply? Should I still be gathering everything, or do I want to wait to make sure that it is? But you would suggest
you should have almost everything done right now as soon as possible.
Perfect. Okay, great. And then let's see. Oh, here's one. How do I get notified if I did not get the grant? Would I be receiving an email or phone call? How do I know if I haven't received it? And then on the flip side, how do I know if I have?
Oh, well, your bank should be in touch with you on that. So for us, it's our people, once they're receiving an approval, they receive an electronic message from the bank. I've additionally been calling my clients. I don't know the capacity of every banker, but your bank should be in contact with you. And once you're approved, you should have an SBA number that you can reference. And once you have that SBA number, it means that your funds are allocated in that SBA. So if let's say you get an SBA number and then the funds run out, but you haven't gotten your funds yet, your funds are still guaranteed because you have that SBA number. So it's just up to your bank to document and close the loan at that point. So what you really need urgently is the SBA approval number, and that should come from your bank. As far as the EIDL loan goes, I know a few people I know that have gotten it have received an email verification for those from the SBA directly. And your bank cannot check on status of EIDL loans.
Oh, okay, got it. And that EIDL loan, we received a question, that is through SBA. So that wouldn't be something they would come to a bank for. They do EIDL through SBA, and then PPP is through a SBA lender.
Correct.
Perfect. All right, thank you for clarifying. And then we received another question, and we might need some clarification, so feel free to, if I'm asking the question wrong, just put it again in the chat box. But the question reads, is an itemized breakdown of the approved funds allowing one to track progress during the 8 weeks period, allow one to be sure 75% is payroll cost? I believe what they're asking is, how do they track their payroll costs to show that 75% is going toward their payroll to hopefully receive a forgivable loan?
That's what we haven't got the specific guidelines on yet, what exactly we're going to need to track it for the forgiveness. I've had some clients open a separate account just so they can track those funds. It's not a requirement. I'm assuming the same way you kept track of it, it'll be, your payroll registers, things like that, your reports through your vendors. But those are assumptions. We don't have the exact guidance on what will be required for the forgiveness. But I would assume the same records that you use to get the loan are going to be something that will help you receive your forgiveness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you again for clarifying. We have a couple more questions, and this one's pretty interesting. If I'm a seasonal business, can I still apply?
Yes, and actually, I've got a little, so yes, seasonal businesses can apply, and there is, so what they have to do, it announced if a seasonal business was not active on February 15th, which is the normal qualifier for the PPP, they must have been in business and had active employees for any 8-week period from February 15th, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. So that's the seasonal business.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think that's a really interesting point. So thank you. We have just about
definitely
2 more questions. We just have about 2 more questions, and the first one is, if I use an external payroll company, how does this affect my application, my eligibility, and documenting the payroll for forgiveness? And again, we've already discussed that is not completely clear yet, but they just have questions about using an external payroll company during this time.
Oh yeah, that won't preclude you at all. You'll still use the wages. And often my clients that have used an external payroll company, they provide a nice report for them. They've just uploaded that to the application, and we've used that to calculate. So using an external payroll company is no problem whatsoever.
Great, thank you. And then the last question that we have received is, they said, is there any loans that we can partner together? Or is it once we receive one, we are now ineligible for any other governmental programs?
Now, there's a lot of grants and things going out, and I don't remember how many, I can't remember if there's another amount allocated in the new bill towards grants. And if you were to get any grant money from the SBA or other local organizations, from your state, from your city, any other grants like that, it's no problem if you take those and get the PPP or the EIDL. It's just that you can't combine the PPP and the EIDL loans. But if you can get other grant money or any other awards or anything through like the MEDC, something like that, it doesn't preclude you from getting PPP money.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying. I believe, I'm going to check one more time. I believe that is all of the questions. Oh, we got one more. Are FICA taxes considered in the payroll cost?
FICA, hold on. I think no. Oh, wait. Okay. So I've got this. Gross payroll should be used for the calculation of both loan amount and loan forgiveness. So not adjusted by FICA and withholding. So you're going to use the gross payroll.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. I believe those are all of our questions, and we are hitting 11 o'clock. So Kyle, thank you so much for your time. I can't stress our gratitude and appreciation. Your expertise has just been very helpful and instrumental to a lot of our businesses. So just thank you so much. And again, if anyone has any questions, there's a ton of resources online, as you can see on the PowerPoint. Feel free to reach out to me if you want some more specific help with any questions, and we can try and get some answers to you. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and really, Kyle, thank you so much for your time.
And Brianna, I just want to note that if any of your members have a question, you can feel free to give them my email address. I'm trying to get to everybody, as we talked earlier, in the same day. And I can't speak for your bank, but if you have a question and just a concern and you want to reach out, I do want to help any small business that I can. So feel free to email me and I will answer you if at all possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's very, very kind. Thank you again. And everyone, just have a great rest of your day and happy Thursday. And I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy.